Welcome to Unapologetically Child-Free, where you find that child-free community that you never knew existed and can no longer live without. I'm Maggie Jenkins, licensed therapist, but most importantly, I'm your child-free hype woman, and today we are talking about how do you actually find that child-free community. If you have been in my space, not the old website, but if you have been around me for any amount of time, you probably know that the thing that drives me in this child-free space, this content creator space, is that I am here to help people find their people. Oh, this makes me so happy because this is what I do. This is why Unapologetically Child-Free exists. We're going to touch on things like where specifically are you able to find people who are child-free? And we're also going to talk about and then what? What do I do once I meet somebody, this elusive child-free person? What do I do when I meet them? How do I help foster and create a true friendship? Let me know in the comments your specific journey to building your own child-free community. All right, we've all been there. We are in a social gathering. We put our extrovert suit on for those of us who are introverted, and we are doing the dang thing. We meet somebody. There's almost like this meet cute that happens. There are birds singing. The stars are aligning. We are like, yes, I am vibing with this person. I'm having such a great time. And boom, we find out that they have kids and they don't have any available time in their day to do anything outside of their parenting duties. And there's this like, wah, wah. Like, there's this like sadness that comes from like, oh no, not another one, right? Or let's go to the other side of it and you have this like magical moment. You meet this wonderful person or people and you're like, yes, I'm grooving. And you didn't realize that they were a pre-parent. You took the fact that they didn't have kids at the current moment as they were child-free. The topic never really came up. They were not somebody who automatically bingoed you when you talked about being child-free yourself. And you're like, yeah, I'm cruising along 6 months, 8 months, even maybe a year or two. And then boom, they start having children and the dynamic of the relationship completely changes. And in either scenario, either way, in either instance, there's this like moment of just, oh my God, do I have to do this again? Why does this keep happening? Where are all of these child-free people that the news is saying are out there, right? We hear all these statistics of how the child-free people are ruining the economy and all of these things. Where are they? Where are they? I know exactly what you're talking about. There have been moments where, and I can distinctly remember the old neighborhood that I lived in when I was living in the suburbs. There was a woman on my street. This was a street of all women who were younger than me by at least 3 to 4 years, and they all had 2 to 3 kids. And there was one woman, and she was so fun, and she was so nice, and she was the only one who liked me. And it was such a bummer because even though we had things that we, had in common, there was just this difficulty to get past the fact that her world was her kids, being a stay-at-home mom. That's her job and her life and her whole world, right? And that's a really big bummer. Some people would have taken that exact example that I was in and done their best to make it work and would have done their best to shrink themselves and say, it's fine. This is a convenient friendship. She was like 4 or 5 houses down. I don't have to bring up that I'm being child-free. I can sit here and pretend that I'm interested in what's happening with her kids, or even do this kind of like superficial dance of we don't really talk about our lives. We just sit around and talk about the books we're reading or the television shows that we're watching or, pop culture and those kinds of things. And there are times and places to have friendships like that, but they are not fulfilling. And those are seasonal. Those are not the ones that are going to last a lifetime. The same thing, and this is not going to be something that people want to hear, the same thing can happen when we meet that elusive, child-free unicorn and we go, oh my gosh, you've got to be my friend, right? We have to make this happen. And so there can be significant differences between you and this other person. And it's simply just we don't have anything in common aside from the fact that we have chosen not to have children. And that is a foundation, that is a starting point. That is not the end of relationship building. Okay. Having one little thing in common is not enough. And so often we will say, okay, I'm going to make this work. I hope these aren't experiences that you've had a lot of. What I know is I've had a fair amount of them, and I've heard people talk about having a fair amount of them. And so when we think about, okay, so all of these things can happen. We can meet somebody we really enjoy and boom, we find out they have kids. Or we meet someone and we don't realize that they're pre-parents and we lose them to mommyhood. Or we attempt to kind of shift ourselves or shrink ourselves into something else in order to simply make a relationship work. Well, for me, that led to significant sadness and loneliness. And I'm laughing about it now just because, like, I'm thinking, how did I not see that coming? How did I not know that that was going to be around the bend? What I realized is it also gave me a sense of just self doubt. And as someone who has worked really hard on building my self confidence, I grew up very insecure. I had bullies from the time I can remember, you know, having memories. And so I spent a long time building up my self confidence and to be in a situation where I was starting to feel pretty crappy about myself because I never felt enough. Okay. And what I mean by that is I never felt either cool enough, or I never felt Texan enough, or I never felt nerdy enough. I never felt extroverted or introverted enough. Every little group, every person that I was meeting, it always felt like I was just not there. Okay. And and that's disheartening. It is really disheartening. What I ended up doing, and this is something that you can do, is I started learning how to take a temperature check of the environment that I was in. And you may already be doing this and don't even know it, is we're feeling out the vibes. We're also taking a temperature check of ourselves. So there were times where, and I don't know if I've mentioned this on the podcast or not, when I moved to Chicago for my graduate internship, I knew no one. One night I had this plan. I worked until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night at a hospital, and was I normally go home and watch Netflix on my iPad and eat something super easy and just kind of wind down. And so I was like, no, I'm going to go to the bars. There was one just on the other side of the alley. And I'm going to go to the bar and I'm going to find friends. I'm going to meet a woman and I'm going to find that friend. I was oozing with desperation. I probably would have repelled so many people. The only thing that saved me is that I have a tattoo on the back of my neck in a language that this person spoke, and that is it. I had my hair up. She passed me. She was like, What is this? And we have been friends ever since. So I got lucky, and I would not recommend doing that. I would not recommend going in with that level of desperation. I would recommend being very purposeful and saying, I am looking for friendship. I am looking for someone to be a part of my world, because then you could do a temperature check of everybody else, because this person also was looking for good girlfriends. And so we were able to talk through just in that night. We're sipping, was probably having a beer, and we're just talking. And in that conversation, we're already saying, let's meet up and making real concrete plans, not, oh, it would be really nice if, in the next couple of weeks we hang out. That gives me the vibe of this is never going to happen. Okay. We want to have, like, let's swap numbers right now. Let's, create a plan. Let's talk about our availability. That's taking that temperature check, right? Another way to take that temperature check is like kind of see the vibe. Like, are you interested in being friends with any of these people? Because if you're not, then you mentally check out and you go to your default conversations, and you can just kind of get through the night and say, I don't have to waste any of my time. I don't have to have that, like, I'm vibing with somebody and then boom, they don't work out. You can already kind of feel that out. right? You can already feel that situation to see what's going to be your vibe and what isn't going to be your vibe, right? The key here, this is like underline, highlight, tattoo it to your forehead. Highly recommend invisible ink for this, is get picky. Remember how we were talking about those moments where we can shrink ourselves and get small and attempt to kind of fit ourselves into an environment or a situation that we don't really feel like we fit into, but we're going to do it just in case because we need someone? We're not doing that anymore. Finding your true ride or die child-free friends is not about like, this kind of sort of fits. This kind of sort of works. No, no, no. No, we're not doing that anymore. Instead, we're getting picky because you are worthy of having great connections in your life. And if you fill it with all of these kind of sortas, it's going to burn you out. And it's going to get you to this place of thinking like, oh, I don't need friends. I have them, even though you never see them, you don't enjoy them, they don't really ask you about your life, etc. Right? And instead, we want to get picky from the beginning. So often, I want you to think about it this way. So often, we get all this advice of how to find a romantic partner and make a list and be intentional. And we rarely talk about that when it comes to finding friends and apply all of that to finding your friendships and finding your community. Because it's not just saying, "Hey, I know this person." It's saying they are part of my world. They are part of this little space in the universe that I'm creating for myself, and I love all of the people in it. And all of the people in it love being a part of mine as much as I love being a part of theirs, right? So we wanna get picky. And one way to do that is to shift the questions and the conversations that you are having when you start meeting people. I have an ebook that I'll link in the description below that goes through this exact process. I think there's like a list of like 15 different questions and statements for you to get the conversation away from what do you do for work? Where do you live? Are you partnered? Do you have kids? Do you own a home? These are very personal questions. And these are also boring questions when we don't actually answer them in a personal way. And they don't really teach us a lot about others. We're often assuming, we're often doing a lot of judgment based off the answers of those 5 questions instead of asking things like, what causes are you passionate about? What is the last organization that you volunteered with? I like to read a lot of fiction books, and I like to ask people, what's the last book that you read, or what's your favorite book, or those kinds of things, right? That's gonna help us start connecting, and it's also gonna give you a really great insight of the probability of a future relationship. Because if somebody is already, like, shooting you down, not engaging in that conversation, not going like, "Oh, that's a really great question," right? If they're like, "Meh, meh, meh, I don't care," then you can move on, right? So those are the things that I have done when we shift to asking people questions that we actually care about actually help us get to know whether or not this is somebody that I'm going to vibe with, that is when we get to make the purposeful and intentional decision to say, hey, let's go to yoga in the park this weekend, right? Because you've had the conversation of loving to be a part of your city's free events and that they live near you and you're able to both walk to the park and those kinds of things. Or you find out that you both have dogs and so hey, let's go walk dogs around the city and those things. One of the things that I love to do with a friend of mine who lived about a 15-minute walk from me is she had 2 big dogs and I had my 2 small dogs, and we would walk around the city. And that was one of the ways that we hung out. And so that came from getting to know each other and being able to talk about things that weren't as surface level or, too common. And so the second thing that really comes from that therapist lens that I kind of approach most things through is that the the true friendships, or I should say it this way, the friendships that have the greatest likelihood of lasting the test of time are the ones that are a slow burn and not a flash in the pan. Okay? And I'm not saying that you can't meet someone and it is just like Insta sparks and you are best friends for life and it's felt like you've known each other forever. I think those are the exceptions. And what we want to accept is that sometimes we meet someone and we vibe with them and it takes time. And so we want to put in all that effort that we've been putting into making those old relationships that have already started to fizzle and sizzle out. And we're trying to kind of like stoke the fire in those relationships. Instead, what we want to do is we want to bring that energy and that intention into these new relationships while continuing to be picky. And so, what that means is not every friend that you're going to meet is going to help you bury the body, right? We don't need 10 of those. We really need 1 or 2, but that doesn't mean we only need 1 or 2 friends. So it takes patience. Remember how I was saying, like, don't enter this in like dripping with desperation? What we want to do is go in saying, I know the type of life that I want to lead. I know the type of friend that I need in my life and the type of friend that I can be with other people. And so I'm going to lean into that and I'm going to lean into being confident enough to say, yeah, I'm gonna keep showing up to yoga in the park on Saturdays, and if that's all I do with this person for 6 months, it doesn't mean that they're not my friend. It means that we're slowly feeling each other out, especially if you're introverted, okay? Because you're not always gonna meet somebody even when we're child free and we have extra time than we would if we had kids. It doesn't mean that we have a ton of time to do something every single weeknight or multiple weeknights a week, right? So let it slow burn. And I'm telling you, I'm living that right now as I am a new expat to Portugal. And I Oh, man. Like, there were people that I met the first solo week that I was here. A friend of mine helped me move over with my stuff and my dogs, and after she left, I think it was, like, 3, 4 days later, I went to a meetup. It was called Books and Brews or something like that. Beer, books, sign me up. I'm there. And I met 2 people who I hang out with on a regular basis. One actually watches my dogs when I go out of town sometimes. And I will tell you that I consider them to be friends of mine and I enjoy their company. I do not think that they think of me as, a ride or die, the best friend that they've ever met in their entire life. And I don't see them that way yet because we are allowing the friendships to slowly evolve. And one of the ways that we're doing that, honestly, both of them have been here 5 years and I just got here, is like today I needed to transfer some money to a friend who paid for something for me. And they were like, why don't you use MBWay? And I was like, I have it downloaded. I don't know how to use it. I can't connect to my bank account. What is happening? And so that's one of the ways that we're connecting and letting that slow burn happen is like I have these friends here who are helping me in my transition. I have several other child-free friends that I've met here. I created a meetup group here I created a meetup group that is global. And so anytime I'm going somewhere, I'm going to do a meetup. I live here, so we do more meetups here. We're all having this kind of slow burn. And I'm sure that I'm kind of lowest end of the totem pole for some of these people, and some I might be in the middle. And I'm having the same experience, right? So patience, being picky, knowing what you want, all of that is exactly what I'm experiencing. All right, so let's talk real world examples that are current. So, as I mentioned, I'm living here in Portugal. And as an expat right now, the thing that I'm enjoying the most is exploring the city with the new people that I'm meeting. I have a friend who I go hiking with. I have a friend who is going to start taking me on urban hikes. So, hiking up all these hills in Lisbon. I have some friends who are married and we have a lot in common. And they met my partner when my partner came over and visited. And we just get to laugh and talk about the transition from living in the States to living over here. And it's so wonderful because this slow burn that I was talking about is actively happening. And it's happening in a way where I'm enjoying the journey and I'm no longer that person who back in 2012, I was just dripping in desperation and saying, please be my friend, please be my. Instead, I'm able to say, I'm pretty damn cool. And so are you. And let's see how this friendship can evolve. Okay. So let's go down like an actual list of places that you can look for child-free people and implement all of these tips and tricks and things that we've talked about today, okay? So one of the first places is the interwebs, okay? And I know that many of you are saying, "Well, let people in real life." I get it. So the first place is online. And I know that we need people in real life who we're connected to. One of the best places to start to get picky, have a temperature check, and have that slow burn is through the comment sections of child-free creators like myself, to join some of the free meetups. Like I mentioned, I have my own, or some of the paid vacations. I have getaway packages twice a year, and there are other creators who have those. Getting involved in the free and the paid events, great places, and at least you have a general idea that you're going to enjoy those free or paid events because you've been hanging out in the online community for a little while. So you have a general idea of the type of people who are going to be showing up. You may even be talking to a few of them who you've been talking to for a while. And you're like, man, Shauna, you're going to this thing? I'm going to this thing. Let's make sure that we hang out while we're there, right? And so that's a great way to transfer those online friendships and those online relationships into kind of those in real life connections. Another are things like hiking clubs. Like I mentioned, here in Portugal, I have a friend who does urban hikes, and I'm going to start doing that. And somebody else in the child free community here sent me a hiking group Facebook meetup, something or other. And I'm going to join that and see kind of what fits my fitness level and slowly meet people in that way. Another is to get involved with a cause that is really near and dear to your heart. So, volunteering or getting part of a community group. And there's two benefits to this, right? Well, there's probably more than that. There's two that I can think of. The first is there's a lot of conversation about how the child free are often people who are filling up these volunteer groups. And some of that comes from having time and having additional resources. And another is when you're meeting somebody who already has an interest in this thing that is often tied to our values, then you already have this additional thing in common, right? So you meet a person who shares a value set, shares an interest of yours, and then you find out they're child free. Now you got two things helping you build that friendship, right? And book clubs, another one that you can join that isn't necessarily going to be only child free people, but this is a place to implement those things that we talked about are book clubs, either online book clubs or in real life book clubs. A friend of mine here and I started a book club. I was in one in Houston. And to be honest, I enjoy book clubs with strangers or initial strangers the most over, quote unquote book clubs that I have with my closest friends, because those don't often turn into me stretching my mind, me stretching my TBR, and it helps me stay really safe, and it also helps me feel stuck. So we want to kind of branch out when we're looking for new friends. We're branching out, right? So book clubs are a great way to do that. That leads me into talking about fandoms. And I'm specifically using that word. I didn't know that word before. My friend Morgan, who hosts that Nerd Thing podcast, I'll link that below as well. And she talks about all things fandoms. And listening to her podcast and talking with her more, I realized, wow, there's so many little communities that, again, similar to the volunteer or working with a cause, is everyone is interested in this one thing. And then you find people who are child free in that. And now you have these two things that you can build off of. So those are just a few places that you can find child free people, and you can use these tips and these tricks. So let me know in the comments which places that you go, which tips and tricks that you use, how well it goes for you. I'm really interested. I want to be along on this journey with you. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so that every Thursday you will be in the know when the Unapologetically Child Free podcast drops, when we're talking about all things finding that child-free community that you never knew that you needed and can no longer live without. And until next Thursday, ciao, y'all.